I leave for one day and then the bomb gets dropped. Okay, let's talk about these changes. Yeah, you're probably here because you're asking about them in the stream too, and I'm linking you this video because I'm talking about a million billion times. Okay, let's get into these changes and everything about them and what my thoughts are and will it actually help the champ and yada yada yada, whatever, you already know. Okay, before I start, huge shout out to Freak. This guy is literally the best thing that happened to this game in so long, and it's not just because he's buffing my character. You don't accuse me of that. I love that he releases these 45-minute long videos talking about why he is doing these individual changes and what the goal of these changes are and why they're doing it. Just that kind of like communication is the most godlike thing we've ever seen from this team from League. So honestly, can someone else at Riot do any bit of lifting, or else Freak's gonna retire from an early age because his poor back is going to suffer from carrying the entire team on his back, okay? Huge shout out to Freak. This guy is amazing. He's literally saving the game and saving my mental state from how much he's communicating and talking to us, the League players. Anyways, let's get to these changes because that's why you're here. Okay, so we're gonna talk about everything, but first I'm gonna start with the good news. The good news is that holy cow, Riot finally figured out what makes Rakan's Q a good ability. It's not the damage. It's not the damage. It's the healing. More specifically, it's the base healing. Not an AP ratio, because obviously on a support budget, you will not get as much ability power. So they buffed the base healing of Rakan's Q, and not by some shrinky little dinky minky little amount, by a bunch. This is a strong heal now. This is nice. This is an awesome buff to Rakan's heal. So that's awesome. They finally figured out how to buff Rakan's Q in a meaningful way to no longer make it one of the worst abilities in all of League of Legends, because I don't think it is anymore. This is a very substantial buff. Seriously. 210? Like, these are substantial. This is kudos. For them finally giving Rakan's Q a good buff, not some garbage thing like 10% AP ratio on the damage. Okay, that's the good news. That's where it ends, though, unfortunately. Let's get into why I think this is a bad thing, but I did want to shout the good thing, because I think that's still good. Let's go to the first point. Why are we still trying to buff AP Rakan mid as a method of fixing Rakan? Because Rakan, in my opinion, is very close to being in a very healthy long-term state where he no longer needs to be changed. I'm gonna say this right now. You guys can quote me on this. Rakan should never ever be a broken, let alone a meta champion. Never ever. Rakan should perpetually be a viable underdog that needs to cunningly outplay his opponents and perform really well and then get rewarded for doing so. But he should always be a harder option and an underdog option, where he's definitely consistently weaker than other supports, but has the potential to outplay like crazy and get massive rewards. That's where Rakan should be at. He's very close to being in this position with the current situation. However, Radiant Virtue's also getting changed. So really, his situation's, it's fluid, it's liquid at this point, right? So, anyways, Rakan is in a very close spot, close spot in my opinion, to being in a really good spot long term. And so the fact that now, once again, they are doing stupid buffs is just ridiculous in my mind, okay? Because they're trying to buff AP Rakan mid again. They already did this in patch 12.19, and it did not work. Because one, no one wants to play AP Rakan mid over Rakan support, except for a few weirdos. Love you guys, but you're weird. And yet they keep trying to do it. This is the second time in a row, which is kind of frustrating. And I'll get into why this is an AP Rakan mid buff, even though it's not stated anywhere from them, even in Freak's video, that it is an explicit AP Rakan mid buff. And that is because Rakan support does not make use of any of these buffs except for like the base healing increase, and debatably like the Q thing. But I mean, like, maybe he maxes Q now in bad matchups. Only time will tell as I test it out. So I'm not going to mislead you guys into saying this is the case now, even though I haven't tested it out yet. But obviously, these AP ratio increases do jack all for support. It means nothing for support, because when does damage matter for support champions? In laning phase. When do these AP ratio increases come into effect? In the mid to late game, when you actually get some ability power. Therefore, it does not overlap with the time period that you actually want base damage on support, the early game. So because of that, this is meaningless for support. In addition to that, one of Rakan's core enchanter items, Chemtech Putrefire, lost 20 ability power, and in general was a lot weaker now than it was previously. So Rakan's enchanter build took a hit, because there's not very many good enchanter items, because Ardent Censer stinks, and while Self-Flowing Water is really solid with Radiant Virtue lost its ability haste with this upcoming patch as well, so the synergy there is like, even though you still grant it to your teammates, that ability haste synergy is completely gone. and even then, Stop Flowing Water on its own is not very good, and Putrefire got nerfed. So all of the higher AP Enchanter items got nerfed, making just Enchanter Rakan not as good. So even if you do go Enchanter Rakan to try and make use of these buffs, which by the way you won't get to because damage in the mid to late game means absolutely nothing on a support whose goal is to CC people, and you can never kill people on your own with just damage. So it's stupid. Ah! Went too long, lost my train of thought. Anyway, these do not help support at all. So it is frustrating why this is the second time in a row where they're trying to buff AP Rakan mid. Stop trying to buff AP Rakan mid when Rakan support the very, very primary playstyle of pretty much every single Rakan player, except for a few weirdos. Love you guys, still weird, but help Rakan support, not Rakan mid. Stop trying to buff the weirdo stuff. Anyways, so it does not help support at all. That's frustrating because I don't feel like we should be targeting AP Rakan mid as a buff thing. That's just a stupid idea. Stop trying to do that. Next thing why I think it's bad news is they're still trying to fix Rakan by buffing his Q. I already mentioned that the Q buffs are actually good. They nailed it in the right spot this time. But why are we trying to buff Rakan's Q still? This is still in the wrong spot. What I've been saying forever is give Rakan's W a small buff. Just a small one, and I think he'd be in a really awesome, healthy, long-term state. And yet here they go again, inflating his numbers like crazy, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but they're trying to buff Rakan's Q to make it good, and because it's frustrating to use, I'm like, hey, great, but why are we doing this to his Q at all? The ability sucks, but even if you inflate the numbers, it's still not going to be why people play Rakan. It's still the W and the R. You're looking for the AoE CC. That's what matters on this champion, and the mobility. So we're still trying to buff Rakan's Q when that is not the area to buff. It's not the ability anybody cares about. Stop trying to buff Rakan's Q, and more so, stop trying to buff Rakan's Q damage and make him a fucking AP mid laner. Stop it! Nonsensical. And then the last point I have is, in Freak's video, he said, because he explains it, which God bless, once again, he explains Rakan's Q is a low satisfaction, frustrating ability. So they're trying to increase the satisfaction. Good. I'm glad they recognize that at least some aspects of Rakan are frustrating. Granted, I think personally he has way more frustrating aspects than his Q because everyone that plays Rakan has very low expectations for Rakan's Q because it's such a terrible ability. Obviously, it is no longer the case because the healing got massively increased, but that's the issue. Why is it that instead of actually removing the intentionally frustrating mechanic of automatically healing someone when you have an AoE heal, which I mentioned in the PowerPoint, by the way, is super brain-dead design from the get-go. Oh, it's an area of effect heal, but we're going to put this mechanic that intentionally prevents it from being used as an area of effect heal. That is just super shitty game design, or champion design, whatever you want to call it. It's stupid. So why, if you're trying to increase satisfaction of this ability, how about instead of inflating the numbers by a ton, why don't you just remove the frustrating mechanic that intentionally prevents you from utilizing the area of effect heal? It just, this feels like, in regards to trying to make Rakan's Q less frustrating, this feels like a non-Rakan player, someone that's never ever played Rakan, tried to make Rakan's Q less frustrating, because all it did was inflate the numbers, when in reality, yeah, make it so you can manually reactivate. That would feel so much better. Then if you can manually reactivate it, you can go into the middle of your team and intentionally heal 3 people instead of healing one guy who's full HP because your dumbass Jax walked into you with full health, right? That would remove frustration by a ton. And then it would feel really satisfying and skillful because, wow, I intentionally positioned it and I healed a bunch of people. That felt great. And they don't have to inflate the numbers by a ton. Anyway, I think it totally feels like they just inflated the numbers to reduce frustration, but it won't reduce the frustration. It'll just make the ability better. The frustration is still going to be there. The lack of satisfaction is still going to be there. Even though the healing's higher, the ability will still have those frustrating moments where your full health Jax walks into you and blows your heal when you're trying to heal someone else. So why not just don't inflate the numbers and you just remove the frustrating mechanic, which would actually be a less strong buff than this for his Q, while also making him feel better than what these buffs will. So this just feels ridiculous. This is not the right area for a Rakan buff. This just isn't it. It's just, it feels like it's targeted at his, feels like it's targeted at his AP build, which feels stupid because the AP ratio buffs you can't utilize in lane, and it feels like it's trying to buff Rakan's Q, which once again, why are we trying to do that? And then if you're trying to remove the frustration, why are we doing it in the wrong area by inflating numbers instead of removing frustrating mechanics? It makes no sense. Look, I'm happy the champ's getting a lot more attention now than he has been historically over the last three or something years. But how do they keep messing this up? Like, because really, if I was going to put a verdict on this, my verdict would say, this is bad. Why are we doing this? Don't do these changes. Because as I mentioned already in this video, Rakan should not be meta. Ever. He is best fit into League of Legends, like I said, as a viable, skillful underdog. That is how Rakan should exist and fit into League. Because if you start overinflating Rakan's numbers to a point where he becomes meta, suddenly you just pick up and play him, and then he's just another enchanter. No one wants that. There's already enough stupid brain-dead enchanters running around where you can first time them, where someone's first timing Lulu and it looks the exact same as the person maining Lulu. There's already enough of those champions in the game. We don't want Rakan to get number inflated and become one of those champions. Why don't we just play to Rakan's strengths and make him satisfying where he's supposed to be satisfying, instead of trying to be like, okay, we're afraid of buffing him in like these ways, so we're going to keep inflating numbers on his abilities that don't matter. I just think it's stupid. I just think this misses the mark yet again. Like, the 12.19 buffs completely missed the mark, and it was really frustrating because it didn't fix his game-breaking bugs that were existing at the time. And then this one is also extremely frustrating because it just once again feels like it misses the mark completely. Every single time, it just feels like non-Rakan players or people that have never ever played Rakan once are trying to do Rakan changes, and they always miss the mark. But I'll be honest, I still appreciate Freak going through and trying these changes. Like, I appreciate that he's trying, and the base heal is still a way better buff than what the 12.19 ones were. But still, even though the healing but the base heal is smart, and I think that was a good thing, as already mentioned, majority of this is bad. And like, really what this is going to do now is push Rakan further into a state of just like, he's okay. Right? Like, I'm surprised he's getting a buff at all, because his solo queue numbers have been fine. So, I mean, I'm shocked they're happening, because I thought really, since Radiant Virtue, Rakan's been a lot better in terms of like solo queue win rate, because it's a lot better for solo queue. So I'm surprised these are happening at all, really. But like, if they're gonna happen, like I said, it should have been a small buff to the W. If I'm gonna give suggestions, which everyone already knows my suggestions, but I'll give them right now, it should have been, instead of any of these changes right now, yes, even the Q heal, instead of doing that, actually put a buff into the part of Rakan's kit that people care about and actually matters. His engage, his W and his R. I think majority of his kit's power is already skewed into his ultimate, so don't buff that, even though that also feels like shit because of a 50 charm range, which, by the way, still a bug, still lies from Riot in regards to 50 charm range, but I'm not going to get into that. So it should be a small buff to his W. Really? Rakan's W has 3 major counterplays. 1, you just use any mobility spell and you leave. 2, you interrupt it. Or 3, you just walk out of it with either really keen like reaction time with tier 2 boots, or just with any movement speed buff. So you can either remove one of those 3 counterplays, or you can keep all those current counterplays, make it harder to keep the difficulty in landing it, but make it more rewarding. Instead of having 70 base damage level 1, right, increase it to 100 to 300, or like even 90 to 290, keep the level 5 damage the same, but increase the early W damage. Make it more rewarding in the early game. Or, like, once again, they could also make his W radius slightly bigger to avoid people trying to, like, walk out of it and such, and make it more consistent at close ranges. Anyways, I digress. This is rambly at this point. Verdict, once again, and I'll cut it off because I'm going to start rambling like crazy because this is what I do, but, like, this is just bad. Because as I kind of was touching on a bit earlier, this is going to push Rakan into more of a state where it feels like, oh yeah, he's completely fine, because his numbers are fine, therefore they're probably not going to buff him, right? Because that's usually how Riot operates. Usually this kind of stuff doesn't happen. So when Rakan's numbers end up, like, being fine, he's not going to get touched. And then, of course, they're going to say, oh yeah, now he's fine. But in reality, all of Rakan's frustrating mechanics are still in the game. Why not, instead of inflating his numbers, especially stupid ones that are targeted at AP Rakan mid builds, why don't we just reduce Rakan's frustration? Because he's in a fine spot. Like, and we'll see maybe how he lands after the Radiant Virtue nerfs, right? But, like, why aren't we just reducing frustration? They even understand that, right? They wanted to reduce frustration, increase satisfaction of Rakan's Q, but yet they did it in the wrong way because they only did it through stat inflation instead of fixing the problem, which is the automatic heal. Why not, instead of any of these buffs, why don't they just fix the frustration? Why is this Q not automatic? Why is this E not on a charge system? Like, his W still gets, like, stopped by people that aren't even trying to stop it, and it still only is a 1-second knockup. Like, your E, you can be barely outside the range of your ally, and they can just grief you, and then you just die, which feels terrible. His R still has 50 charm range. His passive can visually start activating, and then you die to ignite. Like, all of it feels so bad all the time. And yet, this is the way they're reducing frustration of the ability they shouldn't, the last ability they should be touching in terms of frustration. And they're still doing it in the incorrect way. Instead of an actual buff to the champion, it should just be changes at reducing frustration on the champion, increasing satisfaction without increasing his power overall, and then readdressing his state after Radiant Virtue nerfs land. Because obviously I think is when it will drop after that. So yeah, if there's a verdict, this is bad. This is not good, because this means it's less likely that Rakan's going to get changes in the future, and these ones just didn't touch anything important. These are once again kind of stupid. Like I said, small kudos to the actually buffing the base Q heal. That is a good thing in making the ability actually worthwhile and good, but like, yeah, like a Rakan Q base damage buff, like I said, well, time will tell. We'll see if that actually helps in bad matchups, but in reality, maybe it'll be good. We'll see, because it is a pretty hefty like base damage increase. It could be good in some scenarios, especially bad matchups where you can't engage at all anyways. I'll definitely be testing this, but it just on paper just does not seem very promising. Even if it ends up being stronger for the champion, it's definitely not why you play the champion. I do not want to play Q max poke Rakan in laning phase. That's not why I play this champion. It's not why pretty much anybody plays this champion. They play him for his engage, so why am I not focusing on his engage and reducing frustration with the engage and just his kit in general, instead of just trying to inflate numbers? Anyway, these are bad changes in my opinion, but there is a small silver lining, and obviously the champion will be, like, in my opinion, substantially stronger, because the Q heal is pretty crazy, and the base Q could be crazy as well in certain situations. So, like, obviously the champion is stronger. I mean, I said substantially stronger. I don't know that for sure. We'll obviously see. It definitely makes him stronger by, like, a decent amount. Something that's actually notable, unlike a lot of his previous changes. But I still think it's in the wrong area, and I still think this means long-term Rakan won't be touched as much going forward, because this is obviously going to put him in a pretty good spot statistically for solo queue, and then they're probably not going to touch him for forever. So, it just feels bad, because it feels like it's targeted at the wrong area, and then he's not going to get touched for a while longer. So, anyway. Sorry, super rambly, but that is my opinion on these. Still, kudos to Freak for trying it, and he still did better than what majority of all the others did. So kudos to him on that. But still, Rakan is kind of like more of an enigma, especially if people just don't play him. I don't feel like they fully understand what is good for the champion long term, and I feel like these changes back that up. Like, even Freak, who I'm like praising like crazy, also does not fully understand what would make this champion healthy long term. These are just inflation buffs that don't actually help like too much. Although I did call him stronger already, we'll ultimately see. But anyways, I'm going to end it there. I'll be yelling about these changes for forever and a day over at this stream, twitch.tv/featherdaddy_lol. So watch me, because if you like the Birdman, that's why while you're here, I play the Birdman all day long. So come watch me play Rakan. And yeah, that's that. Sorry, this is a lot more rambling than it should have been, but hopefully still useful to you. Bye!